Well, hey, boys and girls, how is everybody doing today? This is your host, Ranger Matt. You're probably asking, well, where is the significant hat that you normally wear? Well, what happened was, when you don't feed your horses in the morning, they have a tendency to take off with your hat. And that's what happened. My good old horse Sid took off with my hat. But I'm gonna have my hat on tomorrow when I do my next show. I got a brand new one. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing great. The weather's great for a change. At least for my area. Blessings and prayers out to those out in Florida. We're gonna bring on our guests in a few seconds. We're going back into the Disney category. I know last week I had a guest on from someone that worked on Barney and Friends, and then before that, I had on, and my guests probably know who it is. It was Ron Clements, who was a part of the Disney canon. So we're going to bring our guests on in just 1 second after this throwback commercial break.
Butterball turkey cold cuts. Any way you slice it, they're delicious. Butterball ham, Butterball bologna, or Butterball smoked turkey breast. They're up to 98% fat-free and all Butterball. So any way you slice it, it's
delicious.
This week, I have a good friend of mine here on board, animator himself in his own right. He worked at Disney for 22 years and is now a professor, and I'm glad to have him on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Show is in the house. How you doing, Michael?
Hey, I got to get in front of my camera. There we go. Yeah, you just mentioned Ron. I got to if you mentioned my name to him, he's oh yeah, I know that guy. I worked with Ron and his buddy John. Ron and John and Ron for years and years. They worked so much. One of those people worked together too much, as a matter of fact. Knew each other. Probably knew each other better. You get into working on these movies, and you work together so much, you know each other better than your own family. You spend so much time together. So had a lot of fun with Ron over the years.
I've jokingly said over the years that I thought those two were brothers because it was like whatever project new came up at that period, they was always together and not separately. So
They're brothers in a way, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were like the Frank and Ali of the time.
Yeah, they're closer as close as some brothers have been to one another. So they're yeah.
Well, when you was growing up, like when did you have an interest to want to get into animation?
I didn't. I
Oh,
didn't have an interest. I did. I was a drawer. I drew, draw, and this is a little bit different because the media wasn't. It was farm country. My dad was a hog buyer, livestock buyer. Worked for a meat packer, and so I just drew and drew and drew a lot at home, and basically self taught. And then um, I got okay, what am I going to do for college? So, maybe I can. The only thing I knew how to do better than the average kid was draw. So, and I got applied to Cal Arts and got accepted. And so which is as a school out in California, out in Los Angeles, and it was at the time very close. In fact, I don't know if Ron didn't go there, but John, his buddy, did. But at the time they were closely associated with Disney Studios, and a lot of my classmates were people who wanted to work for Disney and tried to get into Disney, and got were said no, maybe not quite yet. Young people who are just getting up, and they said, "Well, why don't you try this school, this Cal Arts?" And so a lot of my classmates were people who would try to get into Disney, and now we're going in through the school route. So the first day or so, I was looking around and what is this? Everybody's heard of Disney, but what is animation? And anyway, so just getting used to all the I was going to say software and hardware, but there wasn't any software then. It was pure hardware. It was pure filmmaking. It was just pure. If anybody out there, you guys out there, you ever seen actual film? This magic picture plastic that they used to make. So we actually used cameras, shot our animation that way, editing, splicing, the old school way. And anyway, that's how I got into it. It was just really showing up at school. And starting that way, and it was, of course, it was something completely new to me, and it was fascinating. So,
yeah.
got into it that way.
Well, this is something unfortunate sad on my end. I hear some sirens coming. I live near a fire station, unfortunately. So,
That's okay. It's going to happen here too. I have a feeling, or the dogs anyway, neighbors.
yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to say too when I mentioned Ron too. I don't know if you knew these guys, but on my other show, I had Pete Eastley podcast for 5 years. I had Nick Ranieri, Ron Will Finn, and of course Don Hahn. I had those guys on my show as well, and Gary Tom Tresdale.
Gary and I were roommates at Cal Arts a million years ago. 40. This is October. What's the last month? Gary and I started at Cal Arts 45 years ago. Last month, and so we were roommates at Cal Arts. Had a good time.
Mm,
Had a good time. It was a different age, different,
mm,
And we had at that time there was a animation there was like half a dozen places in the world that were teaching animation because it was such a bad business. Nobody was making any money. The golden age of theatrical shorts was long gone, and there was maybe one place in the world that was doing features, and that was Disney, and they were doing one feature every 3 or 4 years, and it was terrible, really boring. And so there's hardly any places that were teaching it. So we're just lucky generation that once we got out, the Renaissance at Disney took off, boom, like that, and we were just lucky to be there. And at the time, and Nick, I worked with him a lot. Nick and all those Don, of course, a big producer, probably the best producer in animation at Disney at the time. There was we were we were doing these movies, and the big teams were Ron and John, the two directors, and then Don was the big producer. So they didn't want to combine them together. Don's got to produce his movie over here, and Ron and John are doing their thing. So those were the two big leadership items at the studio at the time. And Will, had a lot of fun with Will too. Worked with Will on a bunch, way too much. Oh man, a lot of water under the bridge with these guys. I mean,
yeah.
these are people that I spent years working with, decades working with, as a matter of fact.
I forgot to mention, which is also how I found you when I reached out to you for an interview. A friend of mine that you probably know from Beauty and the Beast, Dave Prusma, who did Chip. Yeah.
Yeah, Dave and I sat together on Beauty and the Beast in the same office, and some of these people, so much. You sit together, so you work together, you go through divorces together, you go through everything together, right? And I know, and I've known Dave. Dave, actually, yeah, Dave and Gary and I were in the same class together at Cal Arts. Yeah, starting 45. Oh wow.
And it's amazing how here go another siren. I don't know what's going on today. And it's amazing how you look so young, man. You look like you're still in your 20s.
Bless you, my child. I'll tell you what, because I'm from farm country, and it was literally I was working on a hog farm one week, and the next week I was a student at Cal Arts. And I'll tell you, that's kind of a background. Anybody out there worked on a farm before?
I'm sure somebody has.
maybe one or two, but maybe not too many. But anyway, so I'll just say, once you start, this is drawing. I can work inside my whole life. Hey, this is great, man. And I get to draw and work inside. That's even better, So, it's what there. So if you're gonna be in media, guys, just for the young people out there, you're gonna be, you might not be doing this traditional animation, but you're probably doing something that has a monitor and like this, working on a computer, and that means you're going to spend a lot of your time in a dark room. And just to let you know, Just to let you know, you want to take your breaks periodically. When you get out and you want to see the sun, that's going to help you, because when you're going to be back in the dark room, because monitors don't play well with natural sunlight, so they got to keep it dark. I switched over and did CG after doing traditional a while, and so if you're young people, and I teach kids now, students, and they're kids to me, a third my age, and I tell you, okay, guys, these are the things you should be prepared for, and that is spending hours and hours a day in a dark room with looking at monitors. So hopefully you get used to that and you can take a break as well.
Yeah. You, you recall what? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if I answered your question or not. I kind of get going off on a different tangent here.
No, no, you good. It's fine. I was going to ask you, do you recall like when you came to Disney and what your first film project was?
Yeah, came to Disney. They were a lot of these movies. They have a budget and they have a schedule, and inevitably they get behind. And so what happens at the end is that they kind of hire on a bunch of temporary employees to finish up the project, right? And for me, I'd been working at a studio called Filmation, which was the last out here in LA anyway, the last big Saturday morning house. What I mean by making Saturday morning cartoons, we used to call it Saturday morning cartoons, and they laid out. They went out of business. They were bought by a company, and that company just wanted the film library that the Filmation had, but they weren't interested in production, so it shut down. And so a bunch of us were out of work, and I just happened to know people at Disney, and I got hired on as a kind of a temporary person to help finish up the movie. And then what typically happens is that what does happen, then the company has a reassessment of their talent pool. And lots of times the last people that get hired are the first ones to get canned. But if by chance you've made a good impression, then you kind of stayed on. So the first movie I was working on was this it's called Oliver and Company, and so I was finishing up on that. I was working with a buddy of mine, another guy from Minnesota who was a classmate, Bill Berg, who was working for this animator named Glenn Keane. So I was doing a lot of Glenn Keane's in-betweens when I first started. So I thought I was going to be laid off, but so then they called me in, and to work on this next movie. It was called Little Mermaid. And I thought, oh, okay. And they said, well, now, okay. So when can you start? Well, I can take can I have a week or two? Can I take some vacation? You go, well, I don't know if we can do that. Okay. So just, I went right in, and they said, here, so now here's a contract. We're going to hire you as a permanent employee now. And I was just sitting there going, what was that before? Oh, you were temporary. You were on you were temporary. You were on probation. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
I'm sitting. What did I do? I just come into work. I'm just drawing. What? I look at the boss wrong or something like that, or date the boss's girlfriend? No, nothing like that. I mean, what do they call it? Probation? I mean, what does that mean? But that's how the terminology was back then. So then, well, yeah, you're hired temporarily. Now you're. So anyway, I was hired temporarily by Disney for 22 years, but the Oliver and Company was the first one.
Well, that's a classic and a really good favorite of mine. It was something that stood out to me as a child and still do today. I had the privilege of speaking with the director George Scribner, and we talked a lot about that movie. So, and
Sure.
Y'all had Cheech Marin as the dog, and so many veterans in that film.
Cheech, yeah, Cheech was on that one, and also Cheech was the he was one of the hyenas on The Lion King as well. Yeah, Cheech, you guys might forget Cheech, but anyway, Cheech and Chong were famous comedy troupe for my generation. going way back. They had albums, and they were good and funny. It was like so the little thing on Lion King. I'm gonna go off on that. So so when this is kind of the fun of making these movies. So when Lion King started, the idea was, okay, we've got the heroes and we got the villains and we got the funny guys, and Cheech and Whoopi were the hyenas. They were supposed to be the funny guys. They were going to be the funny stars, right?
Right.
But then as the movie progressed, the other guys, the Timon and Pumbaa, the meerkat and the warthog, started I don't know, whatever, for whatever reason, just started attracting more attention, were funnier, and they started moving more and more footage over to them. So in the beginning, I was working on the hyenas, and then zoop, I got ported over to work on Timon. But yeah, Cheech, I wonder what Cheech is doing these days. Come to think of it.
I don't know. I mean, that's I had to look into that one. 'Cause, yeah,
Yeah.
he was a funny guy. Still was a funny guy.
I mean, he's old enough now. He's retired. Had his career.
Yeah. What well, speaking of which, from to Lion King, from because I know, I know the stories about how back then Ron Miller was running the company after Walt died, and then y'all had Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and all those guys. I've asked everybody this, and I was going to ask you this too. 'Cause I know you came on during Oliver and Company, but what was that feeling like working at the studio during that era, during the Michael Jeffrey era, and the new animators who came in after the 9 Men? What was that era like for you being a part of Disney?
Well, that was a sort of a transition thing when the new guys, when Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg came in, they didn't know anything about animation, and then after a while, Jeffrey got into it. Bless his soul. He got into it. He was still. I say what you will about Jeffrey, but I don't have anything bad to say about him, and it's because he's an executive that actually was in the production trenches with us. He didn't just show up, when he wanted to. He was there. I'm sure, and Ron can tell you, Jeffrey would had these early morning meetings. He was not a guy that strolled in at 10 a.m. He was working the job, and that's why I always respected him. Say whatever you want about it, but anyway. And so Jeffrey and Michael were they didn't know what to do. They were, and so in the early beginning, they looked at these movies and they didn't know if they're going to be any good or not. But they looked at the studio full of people and they go, well, we might as well give them something to do. So they would go kind of tentatively greenlight these movies just to keep people working. But it was as much a learning process for the management as it was for the artists, honestly, if they were to be truthful about it. But and Jeffrey certainly learned fast,
Right.
Did Michael learn? I don't know if Michael ever learned a damn thing. I have no idea about that. But there was the issue with Michael was that, of course, they came up with this business into the future, had this deal with this upstart thing called Pixar, whatever the hell that was. And, they had, and Michael was dealing with this other guy named Steve Jobs. And if Michael think he was going to out wrestle Steve Jobs, he was sadly mistaken. But that's kind of what the downfall of Michael was, because the shareholders, they were smart enough to know this Steve Jobs, man, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. So you better play nice, and you better re-up with Pixar. And he battled back and forth, and that finally came to his downfall because he was too combative with Pixar, and got thrown away. So, but Jeffrey, on the other hand, he picked up. He didn't get along with Michael after a certain while either, and he went off and he teamed up with this guy named Spielberg to make another studio. So, and then he sold that, and I'm kind of zipped ahead there, but
It's okay.
with these guys. But Jeffrey, I certainly have I could not believe it when Jeffrey left. I thought there's no way he's gonna. The rumors was that he's gonna make this other studio, and there's no way he's gonna do that, man. And he's already built up this one place, this Disney feature animation. That's a lot of work. He's not gonna do it again. Are you kidding me? He's not gonna. And he did, and he built
Right.
the studio right next to the building. And this is kind of funny. He put the studio DreamWorks right next to the building that we made Lion King and Rescues Down Under. I mean, right next to. I mean, you could literally stand in the parking lot and throw rocks back and forth to each other. It was a kind of just an emotional area for him, I guess. Um, but it was a transition period, definitely. And but then as the movies started becoming more successful, it became into these guys, these executives like this, while they had no real interest in animation or anything like that. They were kind of mid-level live action executives. But then something started happening with these animated movies. They started making money, and that got everybody's attention. And that's 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 how they became a lot more interested. They understood that. They understood profit share and market share and all that kind of stuff. So that's how they really got it more and more interested, and how Jeffrey got really interested in it.
Yeah.
And just and he ended up doing a great job.
I agree. I mean, I haven't spoken with Jeffrey, but I've always said that through it all, I thought when his tenure at Disney was the best because the films y'all did and going into the '90s probably wouldn't have been the same without his push and tenure at Disney. And I thought once he departed, it was just like a link was missing from the company afterwards.
Yes, yeah, and but yeah, that and technology was taking over as well. CG was moving into the um, computer graphics was moving. It was becoming more and more popular, and at the very high level, even if Jeffrey had been there, they still would have moved to CG. I think I have a feeling, but yes, as far as the creative input and everything, I never worked with an executive that worked as hard as Jeffrey, and that has a lot of that just type of thing for morale for your people that you work with, because doing these things is labor, really super labor intensive. I should port over a little bit over to the talk of post pandemic remote working, right? Well, and everybody wants to do that type of thing. There are jobs, remote jobs that you can certainly do. If you're working on a group project, there's nothing like working together that solidifies a team like working together on a group project. Now, if you're a Gen Zer out there and you've never really worked on group projects, you kind of you don't really understand the fun and the joy that could come with working on a project together. My kids, are the same way. They've spent a lot of time Zooming classes, sitting on their bed, and experiencing life just by a phone. And there's kind of that disconnect. So I know in my experience, the just working with people on a collaborative project like this is just basically the definition of joy, and you just cannot get that on a remote basis. I've done a lot of teaching, but the pandemic hit, obviously, and I did digital animation teaching through Zoom and whatever platform is out there, screen sharing, that type of thing. And it's just, I don't have to say, man, I've done both. It's just not as much fun sitting here and doing it remotely as it is in person. And we have people, we just need that connection.
Right.
Um, and so when when I'm teaching now at Art Center full time, we were remote, and I tried to get people back on campus as fast as I could. It still took a couple years, but now we're pretty much fully back. Almost everybody is pretty much fully back on campus.
Yeah.
There's just I want students to get together with one another and build off one another. And there's just nothing that can replace that. When you're in the presence of your buddies, not, you don't have to be with me, old guy, you'd be with each other, like 15, 20 people in the class, and um, you're building off the energy of one another, and and you're asking one another questions. It's a collaborative experience. It's fun. It's play. You motivate one another, you inspire one another, and then great things happen in these meetings and these classes. And I think it's almost a thing it's people are relearning. That's the best way to put it. Kind of, because we've had this pandemic thing for so long. It's really been a rift. They're kind of a societal tearing apart of some parts of society a little bit, and when I see that it's stuff getting knitted back together, I see people benefiting from that.
Right. How long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching now for about 10 years collegiately, and or part-time for a long time, forever. And then the last couple of years I've been doing it full-time. And so I don't know how it's happened, but I was never so busy as I was during the pandemic, teaching online. Holy mackerel. And so finally they said, so I was teaching in a bunch of different schools, and finally I got offered this to do it full time. And then, I can do this at one school, go to one place. I'm in, count me. You sign me up. So yeah, but technically, I'd say about 10 years, most of that part-time, but now the last 2 or 3 years, since the pandemic. I don't know how long before, I guess 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
Full time. Yeah.
When did you leave Disney?
Oh gosh, that's a while ago. The 210, 215, something like
Okay.
2010 or something like that. Yeah, I was we worked on the first. They did some CG movies there. I worked on the first few CG movies, and I retrained in Maya, and so it was something like that. 2000. I've kind of forgotten those numbers, but it's been a while now. Let's put it that way.
What is your do you have a favorite Disney? Well, let me ask you this. What is your favorite Disney film for you, Michael, and what is a favorite film that stood out that you worked on?
Favorite Disney? Well, my favorite animated Disney movie was Pinocchio, and that was done about 1,000,000 years ago. But you have to kind of remember. You have to kind of remember back when that was kind of remember your formative movies. And when I was young, there had been maybe when I was going to school, there had been maybe a dozen animated movies done ever in the history of the world. It was very sparse, and of course, great now for students. There's like they're cranking these things out a lot. So if you don't mind traveling, you could. There's lots more places in the world to work at, and work and feature animation and all kinds of not just feature animation, but gaming, television, podcast. There's and explainer videos. Anyway, there's all that kind of stuff out there now. But Pinocchio's the first. But the one I worked on myself that I really enjoyed was Hercules. I did these characters called the Muses on Hercules, and they were a lot of fun. Working for a couple years on 2 or 3 years on that, and my personal fun, just as a professional, was Hercules, definitely. But I worked on. I've said that was my best one. I worked on lots of movies. You probably recognize them, but there's some that you go, wow, I never even heard of them. This is a Disney movie, really? Yeah. But just wasn't very popular, or didn't catch on. But some of them did, of course, quite a bit. But Hercules was one of those ones sometimes people know about it, sometimes they don't. But these characters I did there, and a lot of drawing, and had a great time on Hercules back then.
Well, for me and Hercules, it is a classic for me. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't fully understand it as much as when I watched Pocahontas or Aladdin, but it took me a while. But when I got older, I got the plot of the film. But of course, for me, Hercules is a standout because of just this kid who becomes this warrior hero who falls in love with this girl who's working for the bad guy, and then of course the song "Go the Distance" is a classic to me. I love "Go the Distance."
Go, yeah, huh? Yeah, and and okay, I know way too much about this stuff, but I got a little. It's a little Hercules anecdote. So, um, um, so every movie has these were all kind of musicals. Basically, these are all lots of musicals, lots of animating to music, and every movie seems like they have. Um, I wish Ron was here and I could ask him this question. But anyway, every movie has a song that's kind of the rotten egg. It's not working. Whoever they can't write. They're having trouble writing. The lyrics aren't falling into place with the executives. This it's not fitting into the story, or the crew doesn't like it, or whatever it is. It's all these movies are kind of this. And this one on Hercules, it was Meg's song. Meg, she's this femme fatale, and she's supposed to sing this song about falling in love with this guy, and she hates herself for falling in love with this guy. So they were going to cut this thing, cut. We're going to get rid of this thing, and it was the last one to go into production. And so finally, they decided that Ron and John. I was walking down the hallway one day, and I saw all of a sudden those two guys just come straight at me, and I'm like, "Oh, now what? I'm in trouble now. What did I do?" But they said, "No, we're having this trouble with this song. We're gonna cut. We don't want to cut it. So it's been decided that we're going to add the muses to this song. So she's going to be singing, and they're going to be in the background doing their doo-wop, girl group type thing. And so, because the muses had first started off, they were like they weren't going to use them hardly at all. But then as the movie went on, they started becoming more popular, and they were catching on. And so they decided to add them, and which was great. But I was going back to my office after this little encounter with John and Ron, and it's just washing over me that all of a sudden my workload has doubled like that, but the deadline hasn't changed. So that was the little anecdote on Hercules, and that they were going to cut that song, and then it turned out to double my work. But it happened. It happened on every movie. There's on Lion King. Of course, I always point that one out because people have heard of that one. But on that one, there had a lot of Elton John was doing some of the lyrics on it, some of the songs, and on that one it was the love song, the love between the two, the guy, I can't remember what the name is.
Simba and Nala.
Simba and Nala, thank you. And because he's gone off and he's partying with Timon and Pumbaa, and now Nala's coming and going, okay, it's time to come back and assume your responsibility. And people didn't want to work on that one. They were just, oh man, this is just gonna be lions looking lovingly at one another and singing, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. And but it went. There was a lot of behind the scenes negotiation on that type of thing, and it was because from Elton John's mouth, it was going to be a song. It was going to be a tongue-in-cheek song in which Timon and Pumbaa, they see the girlfriend coming in, they go, uh-oh, it starts. Yeah, here we go. Their fun is over, and so it was going to be a tongue-in-cheek song where they're singing, oh, can you feel the love tonight, and tongue-in-cheek by that way. And from Elton's own mouth, he said he didn't want a warthog singing his love song.
Right.
He's it. And so they did a lot of a lot of negotiation, a lot revamping the thing, and it turned out that's a perfect example of somebody sticking to their guns, and it to his credit, it turned out to be a really successful song. There's kids, we got daughters, and it's got kids that are still singing that thing today. And it turned, it won the Academy Award for Best Song and all that kind of stuff. So you just have to tip your hat to Elton for sticking to his guns, and proving the rest of us wrong, basically.
Well, that is a classic song, and I hope they doing a documentary on Elton that's going to come out. So I hope that
Right?
crosses. I hope he gets into that when he did the Lion King.
He's got a huge career. He's got a huge. Who knows what they're going to choose because he's done so much stuff. I
I
hope.
know. um, and my apologies again to the sirens. I don't know what's going on today.
Well, they're taking care of people. Let's just put it that way, Matt. Hey,
Right. um. Well, not to get fans and you emotional, but I was going to ask you, do you recall working with or interacting with Howard Ashman and Joe Ranft and Roy Disney, who we lost all three of them.
Joe was Joe was in the the class ahead of me at Cal Arts. He was in the. I don't know how many classes they've graduated now, but Joe was in the third one. I was in the fourth one, and Joe is, of course, my generation's story guy. He was, I mean, he was just a great. Him and Bob, his roommate Bob were, man, they're a lot of fun, and he was always fun, and even at school and then professionally, and because some of these people I go back, wait before even working, um, but I still can't believe it. I came into work one day and there's on the bulletin board there was an article about how he had been killed, and I was like, I just remember staring at that article for a long time. But Joe, during the heydays of Pixar, when John Lasseter would go pitch a movie, it would just be him and Joe pitching a movie, and Joe was the story guy, and John would be talking about, and Joe would just be flipping over story drawings, 1, 2, that he had done. So Joe was really Joe Ramp, the number one story guy, really for, I don't know, practically all the time, certainly my generation. And Roy Disney was the blood of the company. I had when he was the big coon. I mean, I remember you always knew when Roy was in the building when you smelled smoke.
Oh my gosh.
Because Roy smoked, but I think he finally gave it up after a while. But that's the way it kind of. It's a different generational thing. I remember some. Went the early the first animation bit over in Burbank. As a student, I remember going there, and some of the guys would say, "You can go." I mean, the place smelled like scotch and cigarettes. That's just the way it was for not just Disney, but I mean a lot of these places that generation. It's a lot different now, guys. But things were the studios and the societal tropes. Let's put it that way. That existed back then are completely different than they are now. But thank goodness for that matter.
Yeah.
And so Roy and Howard Ashman was, of course, the genius lyricist. And I never had any personal direct talk with him, but I animated on a lot of his songs. But of course, that was when you hear Howard. That was as the great book once said, that was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It was the renaissance of Disney, but also AIDS was hitting, and AIDS was. It's not like the pandemic where it affects a lot of people, but what was kind of scary about AIDS is, of course, that it was affecting this specific target population, right? And
Right.
and so it was pretty obvious early on, even in the early '80s or mid '80s, what was going on. It was focusing the gay community, and and people were. I mean, when you got it, that's it. It's a death sentence. In the beginning, there was no cure, and Howard very very early on got it, and there was no cure because it did take long. It was one of the by the time the '90s rolled around and Magic Johnson for example got it, well, then they had kind of come into this, and Magic is still around now. They've kind of come into this way of treating it, so you can still live a very productive life. But in the beginning, it was a death sentence. It was, and we literally saw people just dying right in front of you. And I mean, I have lots of AIDS. I don't have as much AIDS story to talk about as I do cartoon story, because that's what was. These two were paralleling one another. The Disney Renaissance was taking on. These movies were starting to make a lot of money, but on the other hand, you had this death sentence for a significant part of your workforce, and people were coming to work, and then it was always tricky, man. When oh, what happened to Vinny? I mean, is it? He was out this week. He hasn't been to work for 2 or 3 days, and that was it. Something was going to happen with Vinny, and and
Mm.
so but Howard, but he was really talented. Of course, Howard, interesting guy. He did this edgy New York Jewish gay guy. It's going to work for Disney. It didn't really fit the vibe, but it was a perfect example of the changing culture. That we're just gonna find talent, and we're gonna fold them into the stream, and we're gonna have a good time together. And so Howard, anyway. And Ron, I'm sure can tell you about Howard. Even Ron, there's a famous story where they're doing Mermaid, and they're thinking of these things, how to do these, like the Sebastian the Little Crab, this Caribbean guy. I can't remember the voice for him, but he's really really good voice, the guy. And so Howard come in, and he was going to start. I'm going to have this Jamaican guy singing this song, and Ron was like, "What?" And but anyway, so Howard did the thing, and he did this Under the Sea thing, and but it was a perfect example of bringing outside influence into a culture that had would stabilized is the best way to put it, or stagnated is really the better way to put it. But
Right.
bring outside influence into it and shaking things up and making it a lot more fun. And Howard was a perfect example of that.
Yes, he was. I thought because y'all Disney had many different composers, but when Howard came on, and Alan Menken too, when they two came on, it was like wow, like the music in the films for Disney exploded after that. I felt like Alan too is one of them great unsung musicians where his music is just all over the place. Um, and I was going to say to you too as well, before I get back and ask you another question. I don't know if I'll do it or not, but at one point I thought about doing a documentary on the AIDS pandemic and how it started and how it developed, and then where it's at, like, changed today. Because even though I wasn't alive at that point, I heard a lot about that period, and it always interests me about how that got started and how it affected so many people in the '70s and '80s and in the '90s.
Yeah, it was a huge, thing. And I just to teach a little bit of animation history too. And that was it was a very heady time, but it was always also a tragic time. And when you're sitting with people that you worked with, and they're just dying right with you. I mean, I remember with my girlfriend at the time, there's a guy that had it was a lot of fun, like the life of the party all the time. But boom, he'd gotten AIDS, and he'd taken some time off. And by the time he got back to the studio in a couple months, he had lost so much weight, and he was just like the Walking
Mm,
Dead in front of us.
mm,
And and I remember my girlfriend and I were having lunch with him one day, and we were just talking and stuff like that. And then he just kind of stopped, and he started going. And he was doing this, and he goes, "Oh, I just went blind in my left eye."
Dang.
That's what I mean by the you can see. I mean, they're like right in front of you. They're just they're just going away, and we're looking at each one another, and but by the time, and we're not worried about this because I mean, it's clear that this is affecting the homosexual community and not really affecting the heterosexual community too much. So, even we were new. I had people, weren't you afraid of having lunch with these people or even coming into contact? And not really, because it was pretty clear that this is being transmitted in a way in which we didn't really have to, we weren't really too concerned about.
Right.
But I don't know if there's too many documentaries out about there, but I think it's an interesting juxtaposition between the two. Most people want to talk about the fun of Renaissance, and of course, in animation, it was a lot of fun because the animation business had, when Walt Disney had died in the late '60s or whatever, the medium had basically they lost the leadership, and they didn't rebound. They didn't come back. It skidded along the bottom during the '70s, and it was kind of almost a generation, a rudderless generation in animation in the world, for that matter. But then, coupled with the videotape renaissance, the revolution, and the people figuring out how you could make money out of this stuff. Now that's when it really took off. And of course, most people want to talk about the Renaissance and justifiably so. They kind of don't really want to talk about this other part. I don't blame them.
Right. um, well, I had three more questions to ask you. The first one I was going to ask you was, what kind of music do you listen to?
Now I listen to everything. I mean, which is great because now you don't have to buy albums. You can just get like I have Amazon. I just hit playlists and it just runs stuff. I mean, literally, I just jump all over now. I don't have to stick to anything. You don't have to stick. You can create your own playlist, or they make them for you, and you just get to jump around all over the place. So now I listen to everything. I listen to a lot right now. What am I doing? I'm listening to. What was I listening to yesterday? Old retro Motown compilation. That's
Okay.
and that's what I was doing yesterday. Yeah. So and this is the great thing because everything is available now. And sometimes I just listen to I just put on a waterfall. Just listen to the white noise. I definitely do that. Probably what I have to say, the reason I got into drawing a million years ago is because I was a fan of car racing. And to
Oh,
this very day, I still watch and listen to way too much car racing. Sports car racing today is better than it's ever been. And so when I'm working, I tend to listen to car races that were the last week or something like that. And this weekend is the big weekend down in Georgia in Georgia around Atlanta. There's a big track down Road Atlanta. Anyway, so I think I listen to a lot of retro stuff and car races. That's a big thing for me.
well, I know you're teaching now, but I can see you doing car racing. I don't know if you've ever interested you that, but I can see you being a NASCAR driver.
Oh yeah. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. I'm not into NASCAR. But used to be many years ago, but not. I mean, um, car racing when you were a little kid, but like Matt, when you were probably a little kid, there's like something when you were a little kid, like a little toddler, or just turned out. There's probably something that caught your eye, and it could have. Who knows what it could have been? It could have been, a sport. It could have been basketball. It could have been for me car racing. It could have been, there's something. And a little girls, it could. Who knows? Cooking, right? There's something for me. It
Right.
was racing for whatever reason. It was that, and I tell you, these first interests, they don't go away. And And that was the whole way I got into drawing. Really, was through car racing. I loved cars, and there's no media back then. There was no racing, so you had to kind of draw them yourself. Um, and then I discovered, oh, there's these things that go inside cars, and they're called people, and they were fun. They started to be fun to draw, right? So then I started drawing that, and that's how I all got into drawing, was just through cars, and then of course putting together a portfolio, and then getting accepted at Cal Arts, and then working at Disney, and now I have a job in which I've been getting paid to do drawing for all my life. How does that happen? Who does that?
Right.
That doesn't happen too much, but it all started with car racing. Yeah. So you guys out there, those first interests, hey, they could influence you the rest of your life, and I wouldn't abandon them, because sometimes if it works out good for you, you can work them into your occupation. It can be
Words
a form of inspiration for you.
words from our future president of the United States, Michael Shaw.
I get this from working with kids, working with Gen Zs and that type of thing.
Mm,
I just say, look, I used to be an animation student. This is the inspiration I got from various things. Ting, 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 ting. If it works for me, it can work for you. It can definitely work for you.
right. No, you're right. Most definitely. Um, my second question was, you mentioned earlier you have children, correct? Okay, I was going to ask you. They have an interest to get in animation or film production like you did?
My son is not. Nobody ever really took up the drawing bug, except maybe my youngest, the youngest girl, maybe a little bit. But I mean, everybody has an iPad nowadays, and everybody kind of draws a little bit digitally. They kind of tinker at that type of thing. But my son, that's a little. I don't have as much connection with my son as I want to, but he's doing something in film and or the movie industry out here. But the oldest daughter, she's gonna be a nurse. She's going into nursing, and so anyway, I'll tell you, when it comes to this stuff, there's an amazingly few examples of this stuff running in the family. Of all the animators that I've come across, there's very few who come from a family of entertainment, who actually have mothers or fathers or that have done it. It's pretty sparse. It's amazingly sparse in that. The people, they get the bug, whatever it is, the
Hmm.
creative bug, it boing, it just lights on them, and they're blessed that way, and then they go off in their own direction. I know in my family, nobody, they're all it was aerospace and agriculture, and there's certainly nobody in entertainment, that's for sure.
Right.
So oops, sorry about that.
You're
um,
good.
but, yeah. So I'm sorry. Sorry, Matt. If I got what was the actual question about?
My question was, when you joined the Dallas Cowboys. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, my question was, for your children, do they have an interest to get into animation or any kind of film production like you did?
Right. By the way, I'm from Minnesota. I'm more of a Vikings fan than Cowboys. But
Oh,
anyway,
there you
so
go.
the girls, yeah, they're not really interested, and I don't, that's. I'm glad they're interested in something. That's all. I don't care. But kind of expanded. I'm surprised throughout the years how few people. Once I came, you guys, some out there may know this animator Dick Williams. He's from England. He's the guy who was he was uh, animator, British studio, responsible for the animation on Roger Rabbit. And
Right.
one day his son was at Disney Studios. His son, and it was clear that his son was under a lot of pressure to do this animation thing. And all he talked about, though, he wanted to be a barrister, which is a lawyer.
Right.
And that was a pretty. And I hope he went on and did that, because he certainly wasn't really into being in animation that much. So I mean, so it does. It sometimes it skips generations.
Yeah. Well, I know Dick Williams. I've looked up his bio and his information because Roger Rabbit, that was another classic from that era, the whole live action animation and live action thing. So yeah, I actually met at a nostalgia convention last year. I met the actress who played Dolores, the waitress, who worked with Bob Hopkins. I met her last year,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and she signed my DVD. So that was a blast for me.
Is it Joanna?
Yes,
Joanna.
Joanna,
Yeah.
Joanna Cassidy, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She's in Blade Runner too. Many years, or not many years later, but right around that time. But yeah, she's must be. She's. I was gonna say getting up there. Well, we're all getting up there, because but that was at yeah, Joanna. Um, but that was a Roger Rabbit was another perfect example of, and thanks to Dick, of showing the finance community that hey, these things can make money if you do them right. And
Right.
Roger Rabbit was stuff like Roger Rabbit, Little Mermaid, Sullivan Studios, and Spielberg did some, like a Feifel, some
Oh, An American Tale.
American
Yeah.
Tail series. These were the movies that were showing people that these things can make money again. And Dick did a perfect example of that. As much as it,
Yeah. Michael, looking back at your career and everything you've done over the years and then today, like, what is your own personal legacy? Like, what is something that stands out looking back at your life over the years into today?
the my work um, well, it's of course kids, the kids, stuff like that. But also, it's you know, what I'm doing now is I'm teaching, and I had to. When I was younger, everybody, you might go for this revelation, but I remember when I was young, and so much of the stuff I just took for granted had what I would say, more of a life. I really didn't understand all the people that were helping me, that were responsible for helping me. And I was just kind of young and stupid that way. But now I've gotten a little bit older. Partially why I'm teaching now is to kind of pay back a little bit. Uh, People that, well, they may haven't helped me, but I'm trying to help them the way that I was helped. And so that's the little, um, you know, I think that kind of goes on with your life. Now I could sit here and continue to do work on production, right? Like one movie after another, but I think you get to sort of my life. I feel like a little bit more responsibility. I think a little bit to help people, and there's that, but also just to help people coming up. But the thing that I hope you never lose is your curiosity. That's the only thing that keeps me going. Is my curiosity, in helping or software. The today, the stuff that's going on with the, the new software, the new developments in AI and that type of thing. I'm curious about that. So I think legacy is more of staying engaged in what you're doing. And for me, it's never been any hard. It hasn't. I have no problem getting up and doing this, the same way I did years ago. But I'm older now. I definitely don't have as much energy. But my legacy would be just to stay engaged as long as you can, because it's a great thing about this thing, guys, that you never really retire at it. You retire when you're dead, and that's it. You can just keep doing this creating this stuff and keep engaging people all the way through. Just as long as how much energy you have. It's going to be the only hindrance. This, we don't have to. It's not like a sport in which you're kind of, maybe if you're the football player, maybe you get to play 5 years in the NFL if you're lucky, right? And then you're kind of broken down. But this, you never break down on this type of stuff. You can just keep doing it forever. And so if that's my message, I think more for anybody is if you keep engaged, because it certainly has helped me just maintain um, a good attitude to and engaged curiosity and staying engaged in a collaborative project with people. It's very stimulating, and I'm not sure if I'm not even worried about legacy. I'm not even, I don't even care about that. You know, I'm happy. I'm really happy and proud about the stuff that I've worked on, and all the people I've come in contact with, and all the the great loving friendships that I've had. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, you've had a legacy, and your work touched many Disney films over that span, that golden era at Disney. And Michael, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for your part in making those films classics. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. It's been fun.
Thanks, Matt. Have a good
Uh,
one.
you too.
Everybody out
Oh, wait. Don't leave yet. I'm going to
there. Okay.
close the show, and then I'll come back and talk with you
Okay. Okay.
backstage. Well, guys, thank you for another day with Ranger Matt, your host. I know I don't have my hat, but I gotta get it. Um, Tune in tomorrow. I have Michael Haynes joining me tomorrow. He did the audio for Barney and Friends back in 1988, and I know a lot of fans will be happy to hear from him and hear his story. So stay blessed, be easy, pick up a pen and pencil and animate something. You know, your work may come out on the next Disney film. You never know. I didn't. I forgot to ask Michael about that. What do you think about the new animated films out now? But we'll talk about that next time. So have fun, tune in, stay blessed, and have a good day now. Bye bye.